While he recently retired from his duties as a professor at York University's Osgoode Hall Law School, Alan Young's career as a lawyer prior to that had an even wider audience, all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada, in fact. He challenged the status quo over Canada's pot laws, on the rights of sex trade workers and the wrongfully convicted. By his own estimate, he's provided about $10 million in pro bono legal work for the marginalized to challenge state authority. And Alan Young joins us now for a look back at quite a life in the field of law. Nice of you to come in tonight.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
I want to put this as delicately as I can. You're a bit of an SHIT disturber over the years, right?
Thank you. I'd like to think I am.
I know you like that moniker. How did it start?
No one ever really knows what shapes their character, but I do have something that I believe sort of propelled me in this direction. So I was 10 years old, and the year before my parents wouldn't let me see the Beatles, who came to town with my sister. I was going to go, but I was too young. They said the pandemonium of all the young girls. So the next year, a very sucky band from England was coming called Herman's and the Hermits. And I said to my parents,
Herman's
can I go? Yeah. King Henry, the Eighth I Am, all that stuff. So she thought that would be harmless. So I went to see it, but the opening band was their first time ever in North America. It was The Who. And they were really loud, which I didn't expect. But then in the end, when they destroyed their instruments, I was gravitating towards what I was seeing and thinking, there's a lot of creative energy in destruction. And I think that sort of propelled me into that path, that destroying things would lead the way to a better future. I didn't think I articulated that at 10 years old, but it always stuck with me that there is creative energy in destruction. And then a number of years later, because it is the late 60s, early 70s, some drug experimentation, you alter your consciousness a bit, you realize that conventional reality is just that conventional reality. It's not natural and inevitable. So you become a challenger. So I think that's what happened, and I think that's probably why there was such a war on drugs coming out of the 60s and 70s, because it was propelling people to start questioning authority, and that's the path I took.
We've had you on this program numerous times talking about cannabis-related issues. So if you want to go beyond that, you can. I'm not urging you to, but do you want to tell us how much experimentation and with which kinds of drugs you did?
Yeah, sure, but I was never reckless. I mean, I was very careful in what I did. So I did try the psychedelics, but I always underdosed. So
this is LSD?
LSD, magic mushrooms, mescaline. I tried a little foray into the synthetic world and realized that's a dead end for anybody. When you get a white powder, people call cocaine, heroin, MDMA, who knows what it is? So by 18, I had a non-synthetic policy. I would never take anything that didn't come from the earth. I tried everything once. The only thing that stuck with me was cannabis, because I do think it's a wonderful plant that brings a lot of benefit to the world. The other drugs are all dead ends, quite frankly.
And at what point did you decide, I want to be a lawyer?
I never did. I never wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a writer, but I had a lot of pressure from home because they didn't like my choice of careers to be an artist, and they didn't like my girlfriend, who wasn't Jewish at the time. I had Jewish parents. So like any 22-year-old, I decided I'll stay with the girlfriend and take the career they wanted. And of course, I haven't seen her for 34 years, and I've been a lawyer for 34 years. So that's kind of how it started. It wasn't really a choice. It was something that I was lightly pushed into.
I was waiting for the Perry Mason story.
No.
Nothing like that?
No, I always thought lawyers were just liars. I couldn't even say the word lawyer going into law school. And I will tell you, the day that I went for the first day of law school for orientation, I was so nauseated by the self-importance of everybody that I went home to my apartment and slept the rest of the day. So it didn't start on an auspicious note, but I did start to enjoy learning about the law and realize I could use this as a tool for some sort of change.
Well, you've said a number of provocative things over the years, this just in. Let me read one of them back to you right now, and we'll get you to comment on that. You've said that the criminal code should be used only to, quote, target behavior that is seriously harmful to others, and that the law should never be used as a tool of moral hygiene. What's that a reference to?
It's a reference to the fact that we try to use law to solve all social problems. And law is very cumbersome, and it's not very nuanced. It should only be used when it can be effective. So we overreach. Canada overreaches a lot. We're an overregulated society, and we tell people how to live too often. The law should not tell people how to live.
Well, we're changing on cannabis. What else should we change on?
A lot of it's happened already for sexuality. That was a big thing. And I was involved with that too, with pornography and prostitution. So we have to change the norms in terms of how we interact with people sexually, in terms of what we're allowed to read, in terms of what we're allowed to consume. Decisions that build your character or alter your body or your consciousness should be unique decisions made by the individual, not by the state. There's nobody that I would trust in Ottawa to tell me how to live. I don't think they know how to live. So I believe in a limited state and limited use of law. Too much law, not enough justice. I've always believed that.
Because some people might want to pigeonhole you politically, given the issues that you've championed as sort of a social democrat type, but there's a big streak of libertarianism in you, too.
Oh, God, no, I don't like the left, right, and center. I hate that stuff. I'm very ad hoc, and I always surprise people when I tell them that I actually believe in capital punishment. However, I don't believe human beings can do it effectively and competently, so I don't support it. But I do think it is a punitive sanction that is worthwhile to use in certain types of cases.
What cases?
That's a very conservative. I don't know why we warehouse people that have caused enormous destruction in the world that have no chance of redemption. I like to think that every person is redeemable, but I've met enough to know they aren't. And I do believe that a quid pro quo on some occasion is correct. Unfortunately, we make too many mistakes, wrongful convictions. We cannot play God. So conceptually, I believe in it. It's a very conservative point of view, but pragmatically, I then fall back on the libertarian view that the state and the people that occupy the state simply aren't competent to make those decisions.
But I bet you could come up with a name of somebody you'd be happy to pull the switch on.
I probably could. I can't right now.
Well, how about Paul Bernardo?
Well, no, I covered the Paul Bernardo trial and watched him and watched his wife. I could pull the plug on both of them, quite frankly, but she's out free having a life. That's a whole other justice story.
Are you an ambitious person?
No.
Because, again, this is sometimes where other people's impressions of you versus how you see yourself might be very different. You've been at the forefront of so many important legal struggles over the years, and frankly, like the profile, right?
Yeah. No, I do. I have an ego. But I'm not ambitious.
So the assumption is you are a bit of an egoistic, ambitious person.
No, I'm self-absorbed and egotistical, but quite frankly, my life was pretty much any way the wind blew me. And I did things that just happenstance came to my office. People would come to my office, they'd tell me they can't find a lawyer, they're impoverished, they have this problem with the police or with the government in some way. And I'd look at my students and say, okay, let's help them. I never knew what I was going to work on every given year. The only thing that was somewhat consistent was the Innocence Project. It was always wrongful conviction. But I would help mentally disordered people with the police. I would help incarcerated people complete their degrees at university. Whatever I felt I could be of assistance to someone who could not find assistance elsewhere because no other lawyer would touch them, either because they were difficult or because they had no money. So I became the lawyer of last resort. I'm not sure that's ambitious. That's really just following whatever came to me and wanting to contribute to the public good in some way. And I'm happy that I've had a profile. It feels good. But if I didn't have a profile, I would have done the same things.
I know injustice infuriates you, and I know most of your experience is here as opposed to south of the border, but I would like you to compare where you think more injustice happens, there or here.
It's a very simple answer. Everything comparing Canada and the United States is just take by 10, a multiple of 10. They have 10 times the people, they have 10 times the crime. It's all just, I almost see them as identical countries. And I know that's offensive to Canadians because we want to have our own identity. And right now in the Trump era, nobody wants to admit to being American. But we are very similar culturally and legally. And yeah, sure, they have more gun violence.
No,
but
they have way more gun violence.
No, but if you actually did it per capita, you'd be surprised that it's not that different. I think the gun issue is probably the bad one to give as an example of something different. But I'll give you an example of marijuana because it's my area. So we were roughly charging 70,000 people a year for cannabis offenses for possession. And the United States was 700,000. Doesn't mean it's a lot more oppression there, it's just the numbers are bigger. Look, compare the corned beef sandwich at a deli in Toronto and a corned beef sandwich at the Stage Deli in New York. That reflects on the difference cultural and legal between the countries. Just bigger.
But let me take it out of the realm of corned beef.
Okay.
And let me put it into the realm of, I mean, since we've talked about it, capital punishment. They kill a lot of people in the United States. We don't in Canada anymore.
I know. They're a very arrogant country, unfortunately. We have a bit more humility and we're a bit more pragmatic. It's awful what goes down there. And being a person who works on wrongful convictions and worked with the Innocence Project in the United States, they have wrongful executions. You can't say sorry and make that better. A wrongful conviction, maybe you can say sorry and give someone millions of dollars for the false incarceration, but that's the reason why capital punishment doesn't work.
But that's why I'm raising this, because I know there's an insufferability to some Canadians who think we're morally superior. But on some things, don't you think we are?
Well, I mean, if you ask today, it appears that way. I mean, the divisiveness and the hate-filled rhetoric in the United States, we do seem superior right now, but I'm not sure it's more than a surface veneer. I don't think we're very different. We're very influenced by American culture, but we are very sanctimonious in believing that we are superior. But on the capital punishment issue, we are. But on criminal justice issues, no. We incarcerate at a high rate. We've tried really hard to de-incarcerate since 1996 when Alan Rock was Minister of Justice, and the rates have just gone up. We still have unbelievable delay. We have another crisis in the courts called the Jordan crisis. I lived through the one in 1991. That's why I'm happy to retire. When you see two crises that are exactly the same, you know you got to get out because it means the system doesn't learn from its past mistakes. So I don't want to extol the virtues of Canadian politics or legal society. We are marginally better, but I'm not sure that says too much.
You say you think it's time to get out, but what are you going to miss about teaching students at York University, at Osgoode Hall?
You know, after you do it 31 years, it's hard to know what you miss, but I do miss the eagerness, the enthusiasm. I always banded together with the students that were the social justice students. They came to me because they thought they'd have opportunities to work, and their enthusiasm kept me going. I'm pretty cynical, pretty jaded, and get very frustrated with the system that I think is very unforgiving. And it was the young people and their innocence that kept me going. And I also didn't want to destroy their innocence by telling them how bad the system was, so I would just become an apologist a bit and sort of encourage them to continue working. I'll miss that, working with the students. Teaching, no.
Enough of that.
Well, yeah, and you got to understand, any professional school, unfortunately, is driven so much by the job market. And I just wish that of the people I taught in law school, they were all there because they wanted to learn. But so many are there for different reasons, some of them not good reasons: prestige, money, status, things of that nature. And remember, I'm criminal law and constitutional law, so I'm only speaking to roughly 10% of the student body. 90% aren't going to touch this and actually frown upon it as something of lesser importance than corporate law or something like that. So the students became very mercenary. It was very much about marks, and that turned me off a bit because I would have preferred not to grade and give written evaluations to students, but no, we got to do the A, B, C, D, and their life seems to depend on getting that A.
Yep.
And that turned me off after a while.
We've talked a lot about the criminal. Let's talk a bit about the constitutional. This has been, if you are interested in studying the law, learning about the law, and watching its practical application in society, this has been a fascinating last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
On the issue of whether the government of Ontario ought to have used the notwithstanding clause in order to set aside a decision on reducing the size of Toronto City Council, where do you come down?
Okay, look, Ford has to come to our Osgoode Hall and take some classes. The notwithstanding clause was enacted because it was the only way they could get the provinces to sign on, because they were worried it'd be too disruptive of their system to have a constitutional-based system. And everyone knew it would only be used in circumstances that you really classify as crisis or emergency, which is wartime, epidemics, things of that nature, like a quarantine. Where
maybe people knew that, but it doesn't say that, actually.
No, it doesn't say that. But here's the problem. Everyone said, well, it'll operate that way because it'd be political suicide for a politician to propose using it, and they would never use it. Well, they didn't realize there's a lot of politicians who don't care about political suicide because they have a base. Like Donald Trump is a good example, not to compare Ford and Trump. He'll do whatever because he keeps his base. So that idea that it'd be political suicide really didn't deter Ford, and it was only supposed to exist for 5 years, but once the damage is done, it's done. No, I think it dilutes the sanctity of the Charter. I thought it was silly to use what's an extraordinary measure for a fairly ordinary event.
Okay. Let's talk about, we mentioned off the top that you've probably done $10 million in pro bono work over the years, and I'm curious as to what you think the most significant of that work was.
It depends how you define significance. There's no question that my most notorious work that is most well known was the sex trade work. Anything with sex attracts attention. And I didn't think in terms of the sex trade it really improved anything because the Harper government came back with horrible legislation. But it was a really important case to refine the nature of the constitutional arguments that can be made when you believe a government hasn't properly studied an issue and hasn't had a nuanced approach to the problem. So what happened, it wasn't just my case, it was actually the Insight case, and then it was my case, and then the assisted suicide case, Carter. That trilogy has really enshrined 3 principles of constitutional adjudication that are a really important way of curbing excess state power. And I'm very happy to be part of that. Ultimately, what happened with the sex work was a disaster. I mean, Harper just took we took a step forward, he took 2 steps back. So nothing was achieved there, but I do believe it led to the maturation of the charter. And then, of course, Ford comes and kind of, trivializes the charter. But I thought that was important. But in terms of the work that meant things to me, it wasn't the big cases, the ones that I did with publicity in the public eye. It was the things that I did that were very obscure for people that were very vulnerable, that just wanted, for example, the dozens, if not hundreds of people that I got charges removed who used marijuana medicinally. I mean, really sick people in the early days, people living with HIV and AIDS that the Department of Justice wanted to prosecute. And getting them out of the criminal justice system allowed them to live, things of that nature. Things that I did for children of parents that parents were trying to institutionalize them in psychiatric facilities. It's not something I talk about a lot, but I always very proud of that because it led to reconciliation of families, in fact. So it's kind of the quiet individual work that I'm proud of, and the things that I did in terms of the public eye, sex work, cannabis, wrongful conviction, is important to me. But it's not the same as being embraced by somebody who improved their life. It's an immediate reward.
In our last minute here, you're only 61.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're done. You've retired from Osgoode Hall, but you've got a next act ahead, no doubt.
I hope so. I hope so.
What is it?
Well, it's what I wanted to do before I went into law, and what I was sort of propelled to do by my parents to go into law. They wanted me not to be a writer. They were deathly afraid of having an artist in the family that would expose family secrets or something of that nature. So I'm going back to it. My medium is theater. I love theater.
You've written a play.
I've written a play. I love to do music, but I'm really not very good. I have no talent. So I finished the play. I'm working on a second one, and I have one thing on my bucket list, which is to be sitting in the audience of a play that I wrote.
When will that happen?
I'm hoping in the next couple of years, because who knows how long one has on the planet, but I'll just keep plugging away. I'm very confident in my abilities. I actually feel that I used law in a creative way, like in a literary way, that I haven't lost my ability. I wasn't one of those stale lawyers that says, well, notwithstanding the above and the aforementioned, I don't talk that way, I don't write that way. I feel I still have creativity because I used law in a creative way. And just give me 10 years. That's all I'm asking in terms of my fate. Give me 10 years and I'll be able to achieve what I want to do.
What's the play called?
It's called Surviving the Blood Feud, and it's about the divisiveness and the hate-filled rhetoric that's happening in all countries right now, and trying to actually provide an uplifting message of how we can get beyond the blood feud and start acting like civilized human beings.
I can't wait to see it myself.
Then you produced it for me.
Well, you say you have no talent for music. I have no talent for producing plays. You're going to have to go get a real producer.
Understood.
Llane Young, really good of you to join us at TVO tonight, and good luck with getting that play mounted.
Thank you so much.
And with replacing that youthful enthusiasm of the kids that you will no longer be teaching.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me here today.
Not at all. It was great.
Okay, great. Take care.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.